I feel like you just dropped it, man.
Hey, let's just go hard.
So, let's go here.
Welcome to thesextalk.com, where parents can go to get clear and confident to have the sex talk with their kids.
Eric, I'm excited to have you with us, man. This is the inaugural video where we're really just going to talk about the practical realities of how you are protecting your kids around sex and sexuality, around how you are giving them a biblical sexual ethic. So for a parent that literally just popped in and they're like, what's this all about? Why are these two dudes driving in a car? Give me 30,000 foot view. What are you doing? What are you and your wife doing to equip and protect your kids in this world in the 21st century around sex and sexuality?
Man, that's so good. I feel like you just dropped it, man.
Hey, let's just go hard.
So, let's go here. We have a 4-year-old daughter.
Yes.
Okay. And in the past 4 years, what we've been doing is, as she's able to understand things and is developing, we're the first line.
Amen.
We're the first ones to
true.
get there. We're the first ones to introduce these ideas. And you can't control this. I understand not everyone's able to. Funny for us, she was born during COVID, and Amber and I both have the luxury of co-parenting. So someone's always kind of at home with her.
Which is a blessing.
It's a huge blessing. So she has spent some time in daycare, but primarily we're the first line of as she's being introduced to things. And man, we're just giving this big vision of the goodness of God and how creation is an overflow of love and his goodness and his character, and how God made her body is good.
No shame.
No shame whatsoever. And you know what? Kids are exploring and they do these things, and it's kind of beautiful too, because maybe they touch here or explore something or say something that to us, being tainted from, lots of images and sin and things that we've been exposed to in our life, we think, oh, that's dirty or something like that. They're doing it in such a pure way, and they're just exploring. So we get to say, as they're talking about their organs or something like that, talk about the goodness and the beauty of how God created those things and the purposes they serve and how cool it is that God designed us in this way. So we've started at a base level of that, and we've also had some really good friends who are doing this with their kids as well.
So you're not the only one.
100%.
Yep, that's huge.
Doing any of these things as you're introducing this, having community and other people. And again, I understand not everyone has that. So it's not like you need this in order for it to work. But man, it sure does help.
Yep.
To have other parents that you're tracking with that are on the same page. And we're trying this out with our kids. We're explaining it in this way. This went really funny, or this went really weird. So we're learning from that. Maybe try that next time or something. So,
yeah, similarly,
big vision.
my 3.5-year-old, Brayden, he is equally exploring parts of his body now. And that's one of our practical strategies that, one of the things we teach in the sex talk, which is primary number one goal is to not put unnecessary shame into your children around God's design for the body. He made it. There's no reason we can't talk about it. There's no reason it can't be good, and there's no reason we can't allow the enemy to twist it. So I even have to catch myself, because my son literally has his hands down his pants all the time now. And it's hilarious. And he is literally finding new things out about his testicles and his penis, and it's and for me, my reflex is don't touch that, what are you doing? But then I've even had to train myself around, okay, no, when I'm instructing him, it's, hey, God made that. It's awesome, but it's for when we go to the bathroom, or it's for, not just saying don't go there, because I think, I'm not meaning to, I'm trying to be a good parent, but I think it's so easy for parents to reflex into, don't do that with no explanation. And so I'm even trying to train myself to tie it to God made it, but it has a purpose.
Yep.
And because it has a purpose, it's not dirty, it's not wrong. But like we touch down there when we're cleaning, when we go to the bathroom, or,
Yep.
you know, and then when he's a little bit older, I might open up the realities of, you know, that's where babies come from when you're older and when you're married.
Yep.
And so, no, I think that's really helpful with a 4-year-old, because some people are like, oh, I have time. I don't have to start yet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They're like, man, I'm not looking forward to the day. But this is part of it. It's like,
It is such a part.
for those who are Christians, right?
Yeah.
Think about this as a process of discipleship, sanctification. It doesn't happen all at once. It
Correct.
builds. It's a process. I liken it to going to the gym.
Mhm.
So when I'm talking about like any pastoral issue, right? Let's say you want to grow in this practice, that practice, or you're like, how do I have more faith? And it's like, it's not an all at once type thing. It's like you're going to the gym, right?
Yes, that's a good analogy.
First time you go to the gym, like what happens the first week after?
Nothing.
Nothing, and you feel
the second
horrible.
week.
And you feel horrible too.
Uh-huh.
Like as you start to try these things, you may have the first conversation or like try and introduce and fumble through talking about this with your child.
sure.
And you're like, that one's so horribly, I don't ever want to do that again. In the same way that you're like, I just worked on my abs for the first time in 10 years.
Yep.
And you feel so bad that you never want to do again. You could give up.
Yep.
And that's going to make it probably even harder the next time you try and engage. But if you get through the initial awkwardness and just name it, of like,
Exactly.
I just said vagina to my 4-year-old daughter
Sure.
and it felt weird.
To you, not her.
To me, not her, 100%.
Exactly.
Yes. And then the more you introduce it and the more you're able to talk about God's design, it becomes more natural.
Yep.
And then by the time you get to this, like, hey, Mom, where do babies come from? Or why am I experiencing this in my body? You've got language. You've got something to build off of.
Exactly.
There's some muscles in place that are ready to now flex. So,
I had literally a buddy of mine, no joke, yesterday was texting our group thread, and he said his 4-year-old daughter goes to her private school with another boy,
Yeah.
and that boy has 2 daddies.
yeah.
And she came to her dad and said, "Hey, Dad, why does so and so have 2 daddies?"
Yeah.
And I was applauding and encouraging him in that this early work is so that your children will come ask you those questions.
Yes.
I think that's like the biggest battle that people don't realize, because it's like, oh, they're not that impressionable. They're not seeing these things. Bro, I like won't even let my children watch the Super Bowl commercials now because of how inundated some of this reality is around subliminal messaging, around gender, sexuality, same-sex attraction. It's like it's all in right now.
Yeah. Dude, you're touching on something.
Tell
and
me.
I know we're supposed to be talking about the sex talk, right?
It's all,
But this is
it's
like
all everything.
bigger, like the way we approach all these things
Correct.
is how we're going to approach this thing
Correct.
as well. So it's interesting. A lot of people go back and forth on like, do I read Disney stories to my kid or something like, and that's totally like wherever you fall on that. I have total respect. You know, you've got to parent the way you need to parent. We've decided to like, okay, we're gonna engage with Disney princesses and do some of this stuff and read these stories.
Okay.
But we also are regularly reading the Bible with
That's
her
fantastic,
during bedtime. And so we'll do like a princess story, and then we'll finish with a Bible story. And then we've been making it a practice of like, hey, do you know there's differences between these stories? Like,
Oh, good.
this story is a made-up story. This is not real, but there's some things in this story that are true, but they're using like made-up things to talk about just this story. And then we're like, but the thing about this story over here is everything that happened here, everything we're saying really happened. Like, this is true, and there's truth in here, and just introducing this idea of what truth is.
And reality versus
It's reality
not
versus not reality. So you know what's been happening is just randomly throughout the day, if something happens, she'll just go, like if she hears me being sarcastic, because like they're not trained to like pick up, she'll go, but is that true?
That's so good.
And she's asking me if that's true.
So
and then I'm just like explaining, I'm like, oh, Daddy was making a joke or this. Or I'm like, actually, no, that is true. Because there's some things that are really surprising in the world that when kids realize, they're like, oh, that is true? Like, where do babies come from? Is that true?
Any of it,
Is that true? Jesus rose from the dead. Is that true? Because that sounds a lot like one of these other crazy stories.
But it's real.
But this really happened. And just drawing those distinctions.
Dude, that's beautiful.
It's been fun to have those conversations.
No, it's good. I mean, we've been doing similarly with our son, introducing make-believe. Very similar to like, hey, like, there are things that are not real, yet our culture or the show you might watch is engaging it. And so it's like, no, this isn't real, but it's fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say that's one of our primary tools in the sex talk with young children, is very much being in control of the media they consume.
Oh, man.
Like, I don't think parents realize the amount of subliminal messaging or, you know, they'll slip it in and you won't see it. We were reading a book from the library. My wife's been really into getting library books for the boys. We want to really get them into reading, not watch television. So we're like readers. We're like trying to push readers. Yeah. And we start reading through this book, and Brittany doesn't go through the book first. And it's this boy. This is a true story that happened a month ago. Okay. Where he's like trying to be like Dad. He goes into Dad's closet. He watches Dad get ready for work every day. Yep. And he puts on a suit like Dad. He wears a tie like Dad. And then the second half of the book, it like, if that was all you looked at, that's all you would have seen. But then he's like, well, what does Mom wear? And he goes into Mom's closet and he starts putting on Mom's clothes. And he likes how he feels better in Mom's clothes. Of course, I didn't read the rest of the book.
You're like, okay, I see where this is going.
But like, I was like, oh my gosh. Now that's maybe a more of an extreme example, but if you're not paying attention to it, your kids are picking this stuff up left, right, and center. And so I've experienced something. I'm curious what your thoughts are as a ministry leader as well, where it's like, unfortunately, the way our brains are wired, we don't worry about something until it's either on fire, it's a threat, it's in front of us. It's very hard for us to process that, but we can't wait until our child is 13 to have the sex talk for the first time, because these stories I'm hearing
coming at you,
that's where it's like, I just started having the sex talk with my child, found out he's been addicted to porn for the last 3 years, and he likes men. It's like, I don't even know what to tell you. You can't go back in time and start at age 6, which is what you should have done. But like, I don't know, have you had any experience with those stories as a ministry leader?
Man.
That you're allowed to share?
Yeah. I'm trying to be sensitive.
Of course.
Man. There's so many layers to this too.
Oh, yeah.
Because there is, I grew up in a post-Christian context. Okay. Before that term was really a thing.
Yeah.
But the idea was, I grew up in a culture that was no longer predominantly Christianized. There wasn't a standard set of morals that the culture was agreeing upon anymore. So those who were holding to traditional values around sex and marriage and things like that were a bit of outcasts or extremists, and the way they were engaging in it at that time was isolationists. Of just like protect from. But in that, they were still acting like, if we don't talk about it, you know, and we just like expose them to the right things, the Christian way, we read the Bible, but we don't really talk about the boogeyman. Then we're okay. Right? Because we're protecting them from the bad things. But the reality is, kids grow up. They also go to school. They also, and even if they go to Christian school, not everyone's parenting the same way that you are. And even if they go to XYZ, they're eventually going to see an advertisement. They're eventually going to do this. And then what do you do with that? So all that to say, for me, that created a lot of confusion when I reached adolescence, you know, and I don't shame my parents for this.
For sure.
At all. I think now that we've got 20 years later, we've got a little bit of a body of evidence, and more of our country and more of the West in general has kind of gone down this path. it's abundantly clear you don't have the luxury to not talk about these things.
Amen.
And if you think you do, watch out. You know what I mean? And even if you talk about these things, there is still the possibility you can't control how your kids respond. You can't do that. They may require more discipleship. Where I'm trying to go with this is what we've tried to do is look at Jesus. Who is he engaging with? He's not filling his life with entertainment.
Yeah.
That is, glorifying the darkness. He's like incredibly consecrated in his personal life. And then he engages fully with the darkness.
Yes, that's so good.
Right? He's consecrated personally, and that allows him to engage. And there's clear distinctions now between what is pure and what is impure. I know the difference between light and dark. So with our kids, as much as you can create that insulated bubble, and that can be like used as a bad term sometimes, oh, you're just living in the bubble. It's an incubator. That's how plants grow. You protect them. You don't let them get eaten by squirrels when they're little or dug up. So you gotta protect them. But then you allow them to engage in a healthy way, and you're the one that manages that. So, do we have friends that are lesbians and are gay? Yeah, 100%.
For sure.
Because those are the people that live around us. Those are the people we engage with. And our kids get to see us engage with those things. But we're the ones introducing it, and we're kind of controlling the narrative.
Yeah.
And being able to explain. And those are not easy conversations.
For sure.
Like, right? That's nuanced. But then you're starting to introduce, like, they're not bad people. Okay? These are the people that Jesus chose to be around.
And die for.
And die for. And then you start to see, like, even though they're living that lifestyle, there's pieces of me that actually... it's a lot like that too, and I need Jesus too. So it just...
That's so good.
It's a holistic kind of view. And I think if you are choosing to be more protective of your kids, just acknowledge that means you are going to have to be... where you're going to have to engage more is exposing them.
Yes.
And if you are living in a culture like a city center, of a big city, or one of these pockets where it's like, things are in your face all the time, you're gonna have to be extra careful to dialogue on a regular basis from the normal things that they're experiencing.
Exactly.
And show the difference between light and dark.
That's good.
Rainbow flags, man. Like, my daughter loves the rainbow. Okay?
That's a great example.
And you know what? The rainbow's good. And then she got so excited when she saw every house had a rainbow flag. And the month that she's like, this is amazing.
That's a great example.
And then you get to just engage in some hard conversations, but also good conversations about what is the rainbow? What does it represent? Why are they flying? And, oh man.
Dude, specifically with the rainbow flag, I love that you double clicked on that. That's a part.
Sorry.
No, seriously. Okay. That's a part of the conversation that I regularly engage in on this topic specifically, because so often it's kind of like a simple strategy, but it works so well. Satan takes something God made and twists it. Even with the rainbow, it's like, that's God's, right? Yeah. Like, that is his, that he made to show a promise to his people.
Yeah.
And it's like the culture is like hijacked it, and it's like, oh, that's ours now. Same with sex and sexuality. Like, God made man and woman and every aspect of their body and every component of every piece of that biology, and he made it, and he looked at it, and he said it was good.
Yeah.
So why should there be shame? Should there be fear? Should there be anything? And so I just think it's so cool to have that narrative, like even around the body of like, hey, this is good and God made it this way, and that's why we can talk about it. But so much of this story, son or daughter, you need to understand the enemy is twisting it. So you're going to see different glimpses of this twist. How cool is it for your kids at an early age, whether it's the rainbow or whether it's, you know, some TV show that's showcasing hookup culture or whatever, to be like, oh, that's a twist of how God made it. Just at an early age, what a beautiful capacity of protection for your children.
Yes. And this is like maybe a hot take, but I feel like it's not. But like, can you name the goodness of diversity? Because actually, like, when you look at the kingdom of God, the impulse behind putting all colors and all things in one, the impulse behind that is actually a really beautiful thing, and it's actually a distinctly God-given thing that all are welcome, because that is something that Jesus does. But now you've got to say, like, in the parameters of what God said is good and is design. So, like, can you still talk about something like the rainbow and name the impulse behind it and be like, hey, that's like good. These colors, they're saying this because it represents X. There's a little bit of truth in there, but there's parameters here. So it is good, and God loves diversity, but here's the parameters that he says, I love diversity within, you know? So
it's not everything goes.
Yes, and it's like for our flourishing, and it's not just like these rules for the sake of rules. It's like, he's like, I actually want what's best for you. Jesus is like, came that you would have life to the full. Like, this isn't like me trying to be a killjoy, you know?
No, rules are for our flourishing. Like the road that we're driving right now on has lines to help us, not hurt us. There's a reason bad things happen when you go off of the path. Essentially. And actually, I got a question for you. That's an interesting thread I'm trying to pull on. Really, more than anything, it's a poll. So obviously, in no way, bringing shame. What was if you're willing to share, what was your experience with the sex talk? Because statistically, what we're seeing, which is another nuance to this conversation, is our generation, the millennial generation, the Gen X generation just above us. There was none or one. And then we have the introduction of the smartphone and technology and online pornography and free everything in your face at all times. And so, I don't know, I just think I'm curious to hear what your experience was being brought up. You kind of mentioned it a little bit around like the protection bubble maybe your parents put around you.
I think, well, it was too late when it happened.
Okay.
And it was done in a well-intentioned way, albeit very awkward. And too late. So I knew everything that I needed to know, and at that point, it was like trying to backtrack on, well, this is what God says about it.
At what age?
This is what you've been told. I want to say...
At what age did you find the stuff out?
I want to say it was 10, 11 that I had the talk.
So which means before that?
Oh, way before.
What age, roughly?
I started having I think I was first exposed to things like, I remember seeing like a naked image of a woman when I was like 6, maybe.
Which is so unfortunately harmful to a young mind.
And just being really confused. Like, I don't even know, but knowing that it's bad. And then went to public school, and you got kids coming from all different walks of life. This was in the 90s. So functionally being exposed to what sex is in those very formative early 1st to 3rd grade.
That's wild.
So, and just like the conversation and the dialogue of kids coming from different backgrounds, and no, it's heightened now. Even more so. But you got kids coming from abused backgrounds too, and
for sure,
they've got these like warped views of. I mean, the statistics alone now show the amount of kids that suffer from this stuff that are in school with your kids that are maybe talking about this from this perspective, that perspective, and.
I mean, literally, some of the horror stories of our work is we are on the front lines here. I mean, like, literally last week we were at a conference and a 16-year-old came up to us and said he was just recently sexually abused. Yeah. And it's like, golly, that's such darkness. Yeah. And the statistics on sexual abuse are off the charts right now.
Yeah, it's horrible.
And I mean, your story reaffirms really what I've seen, which is the norm, which is really what a lot we're trying to do with the sextalk.com is it's like, hey, let's normalize it. Mm-hmm. And per this conversation, like, let's help parents not be nervous. Totally. Let's help parents just realize it's not that complicated. We can lean in early to protect your children.
Yeah.
It's don't wait. Yeah. If you're a homeschool parent listening right now, you're not the exception. Like, no matter where your reality is, public school, private school, homeschool, our children, these narratives we keep hearing is you could be the best parent in the world. You could never let them have a digital device and never let them have a screen, but maybe they go over to somebody's house who's got one. Like, you can't possibly protect every iota of every aspect.
In 1997,
maybe
no one had a digital device.
Exactly.
And that's not how I was exposed to it. How much more?
Exactly.
Now.
Exactly.
Again, you don't have the luxury of being, of waiting.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're like, well, I've already waited too long, it's not too late.
Yep.
I'm still glad that my dad had the conversation with me at 10 and 11, and that's not me shaming my parents.
Oh, for sure.
It's better to, wherever you're at right now, start recapturing this big vision of the goodness of God and how he made things, because really, what we're talking about, these are good things that we're talking about, and we can unashamedly not shy away from that.
Mm-hmm.
And start the conversation from that perspective of we get to talk about something really great and not dirty. You have to talk about the abuses and
of course
those things, but come back to this big vision of how God created and intended these things and how it's for our flourishing.
Mm-hmm. And how the world unfortunately has twisted it. And I think that's my favorite part of it, that I try and encourage parents, that it's like, hey, if you start with the goodness, the design, the basic biology, anatomical terms, there's nothing weird and dark in that. You don't start the conversation with a 6-year-old and be like, do you know what pornography is? And it's an unrealistic view of how we're really hoping parents would engage. We're just saying, don't be afraid.
Yeah.
Have early and often conversations for a decade.
Yeah, that's so good.
Literally, that's it. And so one of my pastor buddies, he's gone through the sex talk course. He loved it. And he literally calls me up a couple days ago, and he's like, Nick, I finally have the best real testimony story for you. I was going on a pastor trip. I was going to go speak at this conference, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to bring my 2 oldest boys. And they're I'm butchering the story, but it's 14 and 9.
Okay.
And he gets in the car. It's a 2.5-hour drive, and he said, you know what I just did? He's like, hey guys, do you know what sex is? And he goes on to tell me a simple question as that started a 2.5-hour conversation that meandered through all the aspects of what they have seen that is twisted, God's design. Yeah. They hadn't yet been exposed. So that was one of the questions he asked. Okay. And so he's like, dude, this was I couldn't have done it without really feeling like this isn't a big deal after watching the sex talk. And I was like, just record what you just said. And I'm going to tell that to every parent.
Yeah.
Because that's the vision.
Yes.
Dude, there's nothing God made that we shouldn't be able to talk about like that.
Dude, 100%. 100%. That's such a cool testimony.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Of that. And man, the fruit that will come from that too, of just knowing that I can dialogue with my dad about this. Because he's the one that brought it up.
Yes.
And that was my first
Dad's
exposure.
safe. Dad is safe.
Yes.
I can come to Dad and ask any question. He brought it up first.
Yeah.
So I got a question for you now. As a ministry leader, from the perspective now, we've really kind of covered what you and your wife are doing, how you're bringing up your 4-year-old, which, amen. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of working through an interesting frustration as a nonprofit leader with local churches around this issue. And so I'm just curious of ministry leader perspective from the inside. Mm-hmm. for what I'm seeing, churches are saying, yes, this is awesome. Yes, this looks very important. Yes, we need this. No, we don't have anything like it, but we're a little busy right now. We've programmed out 12 to 18 months. Let's circle back around at 18 months and we'll get this in the calendar.
Yep.
And I'm trying to say, hey, all I need you to do is email all your parents and put up a flyer. And I'm not dogging on the churches. I want to serve the bride so well.
Yep.
I guess one thing I'm curious about your insight in is, how could we communicate with family ministry leaders, youth pastors, to be like, hey, this is so easy and you don't have time to wait because the enemy is not waiting for your programming calendar and he's coming after your kids.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know that's a loaded question. I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
Dude, no. I'm trying to think of what the best approach is. Okay, so from a church perspective, there's like multiple layers to this. I think you're right. There's an incredible amount of programming in Western churches right now.
For sure.
So there's this like, we don't even have enough room for the things we're currently doing.
Yeah, totally.
How can we add something else? That's its own topic.
Oh yeah, different podcast episode.
Right. But when it comes to things like, how do I disciple my kids around having these hard conversations? I want to be careful here to like
for sure
all the sides.
This is all about honoring, and that's more of why I'm asking the question. It's like, hey, if you didn't know who I was, and I came up to you,
so why don't we engage with like talking about these things? I think base level why Christians don't talk about these things is because most of them themselves are insecure about the way they themselves engage with these things.
It's a great word.
And they don't want to go there. They don't want to poke the bear. What does this mean for my marriage?
Yes.
What does this mean for my personal holiness?
That's really good.
If I start talking to my kids about this, then I'm accountable.
Oh, that's good.
You know? So that's kind of where I'm coming from with that. And I think when we say starting young with having the talk with kids, this is like you don't wait until youth group to have your kids talk about these things. So it's really like a personal discipleship issue, I think, for
that makes sense.
How we're helping parents engage with these things. Ideally, I know this sounds weird. Ideally, revival isn't necessary. Because Jesus comes back, right?
Oh, amen.
Ideally, the sextalk.com doesn't need to exist.
Yes.
Because people are being formed by the Holy Spirit. They're reading truth. They are engaging unashamedly in the things that are righteous and right. But that's not reality.
Yeah.
Right? But from a church perspective, now, if you're not discipling, if you don't have a plan in your church for how do we disciple parents, we're so far behind the 8 ball on this. How do we do this? I think something like what you're talking about. Why are you not running to it? Why are you not like,
as an easy
I
step
need
one.
help.
Yeah.
Help me implement. Help me start to help my families engage in these conversations.
Oh, that's so good, dude.
Help me do it. But if you correct me if I'm wrong here, and this may be not what you want to hear, but
tell me.
If you're like, we are like genuinely trying to disciple our families in a way where they can navigate these things. So like, I think the last church I was in had a really robust way of talking about family ministry. Now we just like had the benefit of having someone in our church community who wrote an incredible book on family ministry.
Yeah.
So not everyone has that. Right?
Yep.
But even in that context, you still offer something like the Sex Talk as a resource and be like, hey, if you want to go deeper, if you're finding this hard, this way of discipleship, or your kids are at this level and you need some help having these conversations, here's some resources as we journey through this together.
Amen.
But why don't churches? I think
that's a good answer.
Sometimes they're just insecure about themselves and the way they engage with sex.
Yeah, I mean, because by and large, I think there's the purity movement, right? And like Christians get a bad rap for that a lot of the time.
Sure.
And I think it is kind of this hot button topic. And so, from our perspective with the sextalk.com, it's like, hey, we want to give you the easy button for family discipleship and equipping and protecting the young ones because of these statistical things we can show. Let's help equip the people of God to thrive and look different. Because when Proven Ministries did our pornography statistics in 2014, Christians watch just as much porn as non-Christians. And so it's like, we want to go to the source. We want to go to the young ones and say, hey, can we create a reality where, like in Eric's story or in Nick's story, they weren't exposed at the age of 6, at the age of 7, and didn't know who to ask and who to talk to and where to go. And for me, that's why I get out of bed in the morning. It's the little ones that I want to, if I can help a generation not have my story, oh my gosh, like what world will we live in if our children grow up as leaders and ambassadors to the next generation, and they aren't exposed at an early age, and they have a biblical sexual ethic while still being in the world but not of the world? Man, I don't know. That stuff gets me really excited.
I mean, it's the Jesus way.
The Jesus way.
The young ones, or those who haven't had healthy ways of doing these things. What does Jesus say? Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who find themselves in a situation where they're a bit helpless. His heart is for those. So like getting ahead of it with the kids, getting ahead of it with those who haven't had the chance to have these conversations. That's a lot like Jesus. You're just like, man, let's go for it. And I love that heart, man.
Dude, thank you for being with us for the inaugural podcast episode. For anybody listening right now, we are here to walk alongside of you as a parent. Eric and I are literally just parents telling our story about how we're discipling our kids to give them a biblical sexuality. And so, check out the sextalk.com, check out the free video. We have a whole free download for you that you can access. We just want to equip you to protect your children because we don't want them to have the story that we have. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys soon.
Welcome to thesextalk.com, where parents can go to get clear and confident to have the sex talk with their kids.
Because I think sometimes we think we're the first generation of Christians who's had to live in a sexually depraved society, and we're not.
We are so glad that there is material like this for our world.
We ourselves are often nervous about having the conversations with our kids.
The sex talk is about so much more than the birds and the bees or explaining to your kids where babies come from.
In that, we need to come alongside them and serve as a coach.
We only have a window of time to invest in our children.
What do you wish you would have had when you were 12?
We're going to take a journey that might be a bit uncomfortable, but if we will pass through the truth shall make us free.
It is such an important conversation for you to have with your children, and we are just so thankful that it's now available.
What these conversations are, I think, is something that our culture and society need to be having holistically.
Because we do believe that it is life-changing for you, your marriage, for your family, and for your child. We are so honored to be your guides throughout each session of this course. So let's jump in.